Okay, so every so often I'm going to add some little grammar reviews in addition to the lectures on the actual literature for the course. And these will be again helpful when you're writing your writing assignments, and will address common problems and things that you can do on your own time to practice sort of the skills that are necessary for improving your writing. So when we think about any type of writing, whether it be a formal essay, a letter, an email, all these things sort of have qualities in common. With any sort of university level writing, the most essential thing that you should look for is to have strong ideas, and the content of your writing is important. So you want to be have a strong point of view or an argument in all of your papers, and this is usually going to be the form of a thesis statement. But you should have an argument, and then you should have main points to back up your argument. So this is a necessary part of any essay writing. And then organization and structure. This is, again, in formal writing, you would have very structured paragraphs. You have a logical order or progression of your ideas. You're moving from, even in your intro, from a more broad opening to a more concise and narrow thesis. And then your paragraphs themselves are nicely organized, and one thought leads to another, so you're adding transitions. So I'm your reader, of course, so your audience is your instructor, so I should be able to follow along reading your essay, and follow along in a logical sequence of your argument. So I shouldn't get lost while reading your writing, and all your ideas should sort of be joined together and connected and relate back to your central argument again. And then voice. This is a little bit more sort of abstract idea, but to make your writing sort of stand out from everybody else's, it's good to sort of develop your voice, and the more you write, the better you are at sort of creating or constructing a writer's voice. We can sort of think of it in the terms of language use as well. So are you using formal writing, formal voice in the right places? So this is where you're considering the purpose of each piece of writing and your audience. So considering that I'm your audience for your essays, you're expected to have a formal voice in your writing. Avoid contractions and colloquial language. I don't want, slang or informal language. It's not the same kind of writing you would do if you were writing a friendly email to, a peer. You want to elevate your language to but you still want to make it clear, right? You don't want to be overly academic in any way and use jargon, but clarity is most important, I think, at this level. But you do want to use the language of the discourse that you're using. So if we're talking about literature, you want to use and point out, metaphors, similes, the language that we use in class. And then word choice, this is again relates to voice. So are you picking the strong words, words that have meaning and purpose behind them, or are they sort of weak words? And are you using precise language, or is it overly broad or too general? You want to use formal language again when it's called for. So in university writing, you would use formal language, and select words that just illustrate that you're well read and that you understand the text. Then sentence fluency, this is another one. So this relates to the readability of the writing. So it's easy to follow. Your ideas flow from one to the other. So this is where you might be adding transition words and guiding the reader through your argument. Sentence fluency can also relate to the way that you can vary your sentences so you don't have the same structure again and again, and it doesn't become repetitive or choppy. So if you have sentence fluency, your writing just sounds nice and it flows, and you're mixing complex sentences, compound sentences, simple sentences throughout your writing, and there's no choppiness, or it doesn't break up between sentences. And it's important as well to integrate quotations. So this is one of the main errors that I see in first year papers, where students are not properly integrating a quotation using punctuation to their sentences, and they just drop a quotation into their paragraph, and it is really choppy to read it. So that's one of the things you can definitely work on, and I'll be talking about this over and over again, but integrating quotations so they have flow. And then, can you follow the rules of grammar? Can you write a complete sentence? Can you add apostrophes in the right spots? Use semicolons and colons properly? All those things are also important, but it's just one of many factors that goes into a good piece of writing. So if we break down any piece of writing, we think of in terms of the organization or structure of a piece of writing, we think about paragraphs. So these are like some of the basic units of a piece of writing. I like to use this hamburger metaphor, this chart, to illustrate the qualities of a paragraph. So the bun of the hamburger, this is your topic sentence and your concluding sentence, and these are really what supports your paragraph. So your topic sentence is telling the reader the main idea of what this paragraph will be about. So it's a sentence that kind of summarizes or you know, introduces the main idea. And then everything between the two buns are your supporting ideas. So this is where you're proving your points, offering examples or textual evidence through quotations. And then you have a concluding sentence, and this, you might also add a transition to your next paragraph, or I like a concluding sentence that kind of wraps things up a little bit and reiterates your main idea of that paragraph. So again, your paragraph, you can sort of aim for 5 to 7 sentences. Anything more than that, and you start sort of losing your reader a little bit, you start to drag on. So it's, if your paragraph is a page long, you should think about chopping it into, see where you can make 2 paragraphs, more concise, topical paragraphs, rather than have one long paragraph. And if they're too short, a sentence long, 2 sentences long, then your paragraphs aren't being developed enough. You're not offering enough evidence. You're just really saying the main point and then leaving it off. So all that supporting information, you're going to put it inside your paragraph. If you're using quotations, it's a good rule to do sort of 3 shorter quotations within a paragraph. If they're longer ones, you might, narrow it down, so maybe 1 or 2, or 1 long paragraph, or one long quotation, I would say, for a paragraph. But you could have multiple shorter ones, that's fine. And then you're adding transitions between paragraphs, so these are ways that you're sort of leading the reader through your arguments. So here's an example of a introductory paragraph written by a student, and this one has some problems. So this is what I would say would be a weak introductory paragraph for a number of reasons. So if you read it out loud, you can definitely hear some of the errors. So I would always suggest reading your work out loud, and definitely reading it over a second time before handing it in. So I'll just read it. In Othello by Shakespeare, there is tragic death at the end of the play. The death is brought on by the main character. His name is Othello. He is a Moor. If Othello wouldn't have listened to someone else, and would have been more confident, he would have alive and with his wife at the end of the book. So this student did not They did not sort of revise their work very well, and they didn't read it over, and they didn't catch some of those simple errors that could have fixed this intro paragraph. Some technical things, so if you're thinking about the conventions of an English class, you would need to italicize the title of a longer work. So if it's a novel, if it's a play, if it's a novella, then you italicize or underline the text. If it's a shorter work, like a poem or short story, you would put the title in quotation marks. And then if you're mentioning the author for the first time, you should use the full name. So William Shakespeare would be a better way of introducing the author. And then if you keep talking about the author through the rest of the book, the last name is fine. So just use the author's last name. And then we have our first sentence. In Othello by Shakespeare, there is tragic deaths at the end of this play. The deaths is brought on by the main character. So we have two errors here, subject-verb agreement errors. So the student clearly has a problem with agreeing the subject and the verb. So it should be there are tragic deaths at the end of the play. The deaths are brought on by the main character. So that would be this student's thesis, or as close to their thesis as this introduction gets. So they're answering the question, who is responsible for the deaths or the tragic ending of the play, and then their answer is the deaths are brought on by the main character, and then they introduce his name is Othello, he is a Moor. So this information, his name is Othello, he is a Moor, the main character. This is sort of redundant. You can assume your reader, your audience, has at least read the play and knows the main character, so you don't necessarily have to give this kind of information, basic information. Really just introduce the argument and get to the sort of the meat or the major idea of your argument. We also have a comma splice, so when you connect two sentences together with a comma, this would be a comma splice. So his name is Othello, he is a Moor. These are two separate sentences that are being joined incorrectly together with a comma. Even if you had the word and in there, then that would fix this error, but this student has committed a comma splice error. And then capitalization, proper names should be capitalized. You should avoid contractions. And I like when a student sort of gives some indication of where their main paragraphs are going to be, or what they're going to talk about in their main paragraphs. So what are your main points? And that should be sort of the last sentence of your intro. Should be the key points that you're going to talk about in your paper. So we'll look at a good example now of an introductory paragraph. So here's another example of a more successful or stronger introductory paragraph. So I'll read it out loud and then we'll talk about why this one is better. So everybody must take responsibility for their own internal issues. In the play Othello by William Shakespeare, Othello's flaws are to blame for the tragic ending of the play. The fact that Othello is an extremely insecure character, trusts Iago, and follows the path of a tragic hero all result in the extremely tragic ending. So the student is discussing the same argument as the first one, but this argument, or this student's paper or intro, is a lot stronger. So they do that structural thing where they are starting very broadly and then narrowing down to their thesis and main points. This is still a pretty short intro. They could have a little bit more development of their first thought and have a little bit of a transition between the very broad idea and then their thesis, but that's fine. They really get to the point. So this student has a clear thesis. So in the play Othello by William Shakespeare, Othello's flaws are to blame for the tragic ending of the play. So that's a very clearly stated thesis statement that mentions the genre, so the play, the title, and the author. So all those things are important, and you should introduce them in your introductory paragraph. And then you should have a thesis that can be argued.